Yate, Shishki Otranare on Shiero, Tsena Betlin Slom, Tani Bashishino, Kinyani Dashachedo, Skanzoe Dashanale. DA, Nansamba Kai and Sayae, Bahashnet Dole. Hello, my name is Emerson Begay, and my native name that was given to me is Boy That Goes From Place to Place, which was given to me by my grandmother. And I am of the Sleepy Rock people, which is my clan that comes from my mother. And this is my story. I make my home here in East Tennessee, and I've probably been here close to 20 years now. And one of the reasons why I ended up here was I had a drug problem out west, and I actually came out here to visit my brother. He married a gal out here, and I actually came here to visit. But I stayed and fell in love with the mountains and the green and the trees out here. My brother was doing performances out here with his tradition, dancing and singing at the drum. And he would invite me to the drum and say, at that time I was just doing drugs because I had quit drinking in '92. But he told me if you want to sit at the drum and sing with us, he said, just don't be doing your drugs. And so I started doing performances with him, and he taught me about performing and learning the songs in the powwow circuit. And just from there, went through my sobriety and then seeing him dancing, because we all partied back then on the res, and just to see him sober and dancing and singing, made me feel like I could do it too. And how much people were intrigued with the tradition out here, and then also the fact that to see him sober and to see him look happy, and went from there as far as being involved with performing out here. And if I was back home, would have stayed out there. I had a good career going as far as my art and making good income. But I think if I would have stayed out there, I probably would have been famous, made a big fame and all that, but I think I would have been dead. Doing artwork out west, I'd start doing a lot of wood carvings, and that's where a lot of my income was coming from. And it was really awesome money. And when I got more into doing shows and out there at the galleries and dealing with them, they wanted more of my artwork, to where I would get burned out quick on the marijuana. It would wear off easy, quicker. And one day I went to my dealer and I said, look, I gotta have a certain amount of artwork done, and I just don't have the time to keep doing the marijuana. And he introduced me to speed, and that actually kept me going. And then I told him I would be done with my work, then sell it in Santa Fe and Albuquerque. And I told him I'd still be so high, I'd be like the Tasmanian devil, just keep going and going. And he introduced me to downers, so I was mixing the two to balance it out. And like I said, I eventually end up here. Well, I grew up in Arizona, and that's where my dad is from. And what it is when Navajo, when they get married, they go to the man's side of the family and build their home there or close by, the traditional way. And we lived around my grandmother and grandfather and my aunts. They all had like a little community together. So the good thing about it was it kept me in touch with my tradition. Then also we were always pushed to learn our language. So I was fortunate to be around all that and learn the language. And at the same time, my parents teaching us to speak English. My father was a bull rider, so he would do that on weekends, and he worked at the school as um, helping the students there in the boarding schools. And then in the weekends, we'd be at the rodeo, and like I said, my dad's a bull rider, and doing the rodeo circuit there, the local tribal circuit right there on the reservation throughout Navajo land. So he would travel to different rodeos. And my father, he started drinking really bad. He'd come home drinking, drunk, and of course there was violence, between my parents, and he would beat up my mom. And as kids we saw all that, and that's eventually what broke up the family. And my mom just left, never came back, so we were out there and started being brought up by my grandparents and my aunts in that area, and ended up in boarding school. Boarding school was like military. And, they marched us around, and the discipline, and the one intriguing thing was, when I was younger, they wouldn't let us speak our language. And the guy we called him the dorm aide, was Navajo. He's like a sergeant. So he had the job of, keeping an eye on us and not speaking Navajo. And we're disciplined for that too, speaking our own language. And then on weekends we'd go home. And a lot of times it was hard because we had no parents to go home to. My dad was hardly around, because he was out drinking, or I don't know where he was at. But my grandparents took care of us, so we learned a lot more of the traditional ways. And then also, my grandmother was a medicine lady, and she's the one that gave me my name, as far as when she would look for me or yell for me, and that's ended up being my name, because I was always going somewhere and, keeping things going as far as fun and not being bored, and from there we ended up in New Mexico on my mom's side of the family, and it was the same thing, to where my grandmother took care of us, and being bouncing around to different relatives, and of course we experienced the boarding school there too. There's different churches that come around throughout the reservation, helping the families, or just to help, rebuild a house, or etc. The churches out there helping. But we got introduced to the Mormon church through my aunt, and she was sending her kids to what's called the Indian Placement Program that at the time the Mormons were running. But my aunt got us into that program, and the local Mormon church there, we gathered there and got put on a Greyhound bus. And the first year I went to Logan, Utah, and I was in 4th grade when I first went up to Utah. And of course I experienced homesickness and all that culture shock, and to have somebody come up to you and say, this is your family now, this is who you're going to live with for the next 9 months, for school. And looking at them, it's just a white family, and they take you home. And I tell you what, I cried for 3 days. I was just so homesick, I miss home, being a shepherd, and speaking my language. And then finally adapted to it, to where I went to school, and I went there 4th and 5th grade, and then I went back on the reservation in Arizona, 6th grade, because we missed the bus to go back to Utah. And so what happened is we went back to the boarding school, but by that time, it wasn't run by the government no more. It was a community school. But what they had brought back was the language. We could actually speak the language now. And then also I learned how to read and write it, and also the history of the um, my people, the Danaes. So that was awesome. Eighth, ninth, and 10th grade, I ended up in Salt Lake City on the same Mormon program. But due to bad grades and all that, I ended up back in the reservation and finished my 11th and 12th grade years and back out on the reservation in New Mexico. I really miss my mom because she guided me on this path and this road that I'm on, and really encouraged me to pursue my career. Being an artist, it's a struggle, but she always told me, I know you love art, and I'll, being a musician too, but I will, you know, be there as far as, encouraging you, and which she did, when I was in high school. One time my brother came back, wanted to go party with him he wanted me to go party with them during the school day, and she pulled me aside and she said, all right, get all your clothes and go with them. Party all you want. But I just want you to get your diploma. You can stay here at the house here. I'll buy your clothes, your books, whatever you need. I just want you to get that piece of paper. And, I really thank her for that, because she encouraged us to get our education, and that's who I miss a lot, is my mom, and of course my brothers and sisters and cousins and friends, and some that are still there. And of course the fry bread. But I do miss home at times, but this is home for me now. I fell in love with the trees and the green, and actually also the people. It made me part of their lives here, and as far as career wise, this is where I feel comfortable now.